We are now live. Hi, I am Marcy Hill, and today on What Matters to Miss Marcy, I'm here with Bettina Chang of City Bureau. And Bettina, could you tell us more about yourself?
Hi, Marcy. Thanks so much for having me on. My name is Bettina. I am a journalist and editor, and I'm also co-founder of a civic journalism lab based on the south side of Chicago called City Bureau. So what we do at City Bureau is a few different things, but the goal is to bring journalists and community members together to make sure we're working towards a more equitable media system, and also encouraging civic participation. So that could mean a lot of different things. For instance, we're trying to train more journalists so that the journalism industry can be more diverse, and we're trying to help more people get the skills of journalists, even if they're not going to become journalists, because we think that there's a lot of power in those skills, and we want to make sure as many people as possible have access to that power.
And I want to go back to something that you said about what would you say equitable media. Could you expound upon that, please?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that probably a lot of your viewers and a lot of our audience members know that media is not always very equitable. They might see themselves misrepresented in the media, or they feel like there are biased depictions or, like sort of outsidery depictions of their communities, where somebody who doesn't really understand where they're coming from comes in and parachutes in and then says something about their community that's not true. Now, that's especially common on the south and west sides of Chicago, based on a lot of the conversations that we've had with people. And we're just trying to make sure that when the stories are told, that they're told by people who really understand the communities and know what's at stake. So when we say equitable, we mean a few different things, which is that not only does everybody have access to the news and information that they need, but also that people have access to tell their own stories and to get their voices heard.
Wonderful. And I wanted to interview you today because I actually participated at the end of 2016, the fall session of, no, I was a reporting fellow in the fall of 2016. Very valuable experience because I learned journalism skills, as you guys, which is one of your missions, as well as I had the opportunity to mentor group at, I can't think of the name of the nonprofit, but through this mentoring organization, not only did I have a chance to share my knowledge and my skills as a writer, but then I also got to learn what was important to young people in Roseland, because they have that's probably one of those communities that's, I won't say not that's misrepresented in the news. So how did you guys start the mentoring part? Well, let me step back. How did City Bureau begin, and then how did the mentoring piece come in?
Yeah, definitely. And we're so glad to have you on that program. And we have applications available again. So if anybody watching is interested in joining the program, the application is due February 4th. Or you, Marcy, if you have time again to join us. So the program started a little over 2 years ago. There's 4 of us who are co-founders, myself, Daryl Holliday, Andrea Hart, and Harry Backlund. And the 4 of us all work in different parts of journalism. So Andrea's an educator, Daryl's a reporter, and Harry's a publisher, and I'm an editor. And we were all having these conversations about how we felt a little bit frustrated about the way that media works, and things that we saw happening in the places that we work that we thought could be better, and that we thought, that people deserve better. And after just, chatting over drinks and dinner, we decided hey, what if we do something and put all of these ideas together and create an organization that is built around, some of these core ideas and on fixing some of the things that are wrong. So that's how City Bureau came about. And to your point, Marcy, about mentoring youth, I think one of the things that that really came up, especially with Andrea being an educator, is that, there's all these great youth media programs in the city. I think the one that you worked with in Roseland, Marcy, was Impact Family Center.
Yeah.
they do really great work, trying to engage young people around media making and, telling their own stories and learning how to interview and find facts and help spread knowledge in their communities. But these young people, due to the way that the organizations are set up and the way that our society is set up, they didn't really have any pathways after the youth media organization to get involved. Journalism, unfortunately, is just a really closed industry. There are a lot of barriers to people of color or people of low income to get into an industry where, you're often going to be asked to take an unpaid internship. You need to know the right people, otherwise you won't have your resume looked at. A lot of these different barriers that keep people out. So one of the main things we wanted to do was to sort of pair our program, the fellowship program, which Marcy was in, with youth media programs. Sorry, it's dark in here. Hold on a second. Sorry, I'm in an office that has like those sensor lights. What was I saying? Oh, right. So we pair our reporting fellows with these young people to give them a sense of like, this is a future that I could have, that a young person could look at Marcy and see like, oh, this is how she made it into her writing career. And so they feel like it's attainable for them, versus prior to that, when they didn't have mentors, it was a little bit harder for them to make the connection between like, this is what I'm doing now and this is what I could do as a career. So that was one of the main reasons that we think mentorship is so important, to make sure these young people have something to aspire to in the media industry.
Oh, see, I like that component of the program. I like the entire program, but I did like the fact that you brought young people in to see how journalism was done and to let them know that they do have a voice. And boy, did they use them. Upset. I was happy that they were expressing themselves, even if, some people were just frustrated. And then I personally wanted to let my people know, my group know, look, this is a tool and you guys have access to social media, so you can actually be making news throughout the day, as long as it's good. I won't say good news, but don't just be negative about everything. We already have enough. There's a way you can express what you're doing and what you're saying without being super negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those principles. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, they definitely have a voice, so they have something to say, right? So, having them have these like older and professional mentors can help them understand like what is the kind of stuff that you can say that like eventually you can get paid for, right? Because it's not every person who's posting on social media who can make a career out of it.
But how did you get into journalism? Did you have any challenges?
Well, I was really lucky. I think I'm a very privileged person, and I think that a lot of my work that I do now is in an effort to acknowledge it and to make sure that people who don't have those privileges can get a leg up in a way that I was able to. So I went to journalism school at Northwestern, very expensive school, and I know that not everybody can go to a school like Northwestern. Nowadays, when we run City Bureau, you're not required to have a journalism degree or even a college degree to join our programs. I think that the path that I took showed me just how many advantages that you can unfairly get in the industry. There's like an alumni network where you could just reach out and say like, hey, like these are my credentials. Is anyone interested? But then once I made it to a professional organization, I noticed that people who don't have access to that kind of stuff, their resumes just sort of get set to the side. And so everything. Wow. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I think everything we do at City Bureau is trying to combat we have this knowledge of how things work on the inside, and we're trying to sort of turn it inside out so that people can see, and it's transparent how that happens, so that, for instance, when a publication says like, oh, we looked everywhere for a writer of color, but we just couldn't find a candidate, that we can go to them and say like, hey, we know you're wrong. We know that you didn't look everywhere. We know like these are and this is how you ended up with a person who looks just like every other single person on your staff. And it's a really hard conversation to have, because I think that a lot of these publications genuinely think that they're trying as hard as they can. So we have to sort of help them unlearn that, these biases, so that we can say like, okay, now let's retake inventory of how a journalism staff is built. So yeah, I would say, I was really lucky to come up the way that I did. And because of that, like, I know how much it's stacked against people, and I'm, trying my best to tear it down.
Okay, and City Bureau is a nonprofit organization. Why did you go that route? Why did you and your team decide nonprofit?
Yeah, that's such a hard that's a hard question. I think there was definitely a time at which we could have gone either way, because being a nonprofit is pretty tough in terms of the additional administrative stuff that it adds to what you have to do. But in the end, we really wanted to make sure that we sent a message to our fans and our audience to say, like, we're not trying to garner profit from the work that we're doing. We think what we do is a public good. We think that everybody benefits from it. And we think that, if you donate, then you should feel good about being able to provide a service that other people wouldn't necessarily be able to pay for. We prefer to not think of journalism as a consumer good. It doesn't really check the same boxes as something like, buying a bag of chips or whatever. It's not like once somebody consumes it, it's gone forever. No one else can have it. And because of the economics of that, I think journalism really lends itself to be more of a public good, sort of like, like the street lights. Everybody benefits from it. So everybody sort of pays into it in very small amounts. So, we're a nonprofit. We get some funding from big foundations, like big private foundations. We also get a lot of funding from, our followers. We have a membership program. People can pay like $8 a month to join the program, which is like the same cost as a Netflix account, basically. If you want to support strong local journalism that really cares about involving audiences into the storytelling process every step of the way, you could just put in a few bucks, and you get all these perks, like getting an inside look at the way that we do things, being able to RSVP early to some of our more popular events. Cool swag, of course, is part of it. But it's really about building a community and finding a way for everybody to get involved. So it's not, we find that a lot of people view journalism as like this sort of shining house on the hill that they don't understand, and they get angry at a lot. And we're trying to take it down, to be like, okay, we're all on the same level here. Like, we're trying to share our power so we can work towards this goal together. So let's convene and let's talk about the ways that we can help each other, rather than, feel this like adversarial relationship. So being a nonprofit really helps with that. I think people are much more willing to give money if they don't think that the money is going to be like siphoned off by someone at the top to like make, to make stock prices rise or something like that.
Okay, so I do have a question about, I'm bringing up fake news. And City Bureau helping to combat the hashtag fake news.
Right. Fake news is it's such a popular term nowadays.
Right, it so needs to be eradicated. But I know that, so I'm a writer, not a trained journalist, but I get upset by what I see. As you said, the underrepresentation, the misrepresentation, and it's really bad in Chicago. I mean, you have mainstream media in general. But then even in Chicago, when you watch the news, as you stated, it shows, you think if you came to Chicago, you would think pretty much all Black people killed each other and everybody else, if you watch the news.
Right.
And the perception you'll get, because I had someone on Twitter to ask me, oh, do you feel safe? I do feel safe. Based on, and what was interesting is the guy who asked that question was a blind guy. So he's listening, he's taking everything, he's not even seeing the visuals. Mm-hmm. I was like, wow, it's bad, but it's not that bad. because we do have, but the bad thing is they don't provide the context in which all of these things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you just read up on Chicago, you really don't know. All you see is the number of death, the death report every weekend or even Monday, like the number of people that have died over the weekend, which is unfortunate, but that's Chicago media.
Right.
But getting back to the original point, combating fake news. How is your program helping that? So whenever you hear fake news, you're like, I know you probably scream.
Yeah,
A highly trained journalist.
well, it's a term used to refer to so many things now, right? So I mean, like, the original meaning was like supposed to be specific and talking about people who just completely make up stories as if they actually happen and then publish them on sites that look like news sites but aren't.
Okay.
And then it was sort of co-opted and used by a lot of people, specifically President Trump, to talk about any news that was, negative about him. So it's really hard to sort through at this point. I mean, I could totally understand. For instance, my cousin just moved to America from Taiwan, and she is just like totally baffled at our news cycle. She just doesn't understand, like, why are these people talking 24/7? Like who am I supposed to listen to? She can't tell like which outlets are reputable and which ones aren't, because she just totally lacks the context. And I can definitely understand how a lot of people like look at the news as it's reported and think to themselves, like, is this fake? Is this not fake? And I think one of the ways that City Bureau has tried to tackle this, and remember, City Bureau actually was established like a year before. It was established in 2015. So it was before this whole fake news thing came about. But I think that, like, in some ways we sort of predicted this, because we've been talking so much about communities distrusting media and not understanding or feeling like they get sufficient answers from the media. And we think that this is a totally natural response to the fact that mainstream media or corporate media for a really long time has ignored the needs of their audiences, especially audiences who are low income or working class or people of color, LGBTQ people. Like, there's huge swaths of America that have been really underserved by media. And I think that when you talk about distrust, a lot of journalists might quickly be like, like, no, everyone should trust us. And like, there's a difference between fake news and real news, which, I do agree that there are outlets that you should listen to and outlets that you shouldn't. However, I also don't want to obscure this really true reality for people, where there's a reason that people distrust media. Like, if you're a mom living in back of the yards and you've only met one journalist in your life, and that journalist came up to you because there was a shooting on your street, and they shove a microphone in your face and they say, like, tell me how you feel about this shooting, of course that person is not going to trust media, because she's like, this person doesn't care about me unless there's a shooting on my street. This person only wants to talk to me when I'm having one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. And so at City Bureau, what we try to do is make sure that journalists are interacting with community members in really productive, two-sided ways, like a two-way road, where there's information exchange and value being exchanged both ways many times, so that you're not feeling like media is just trying to extract from you, trying to take something from you during a time when you are maybe not feeling great and don't want to talk to anyone. And so we think that building that kind of trust is what's going to make it so that fake media or fake news doesn't really have the same sway as before. Because when you've met a journalist and for instance, like, oh, this is my friendly local City Bureau journalist, and she just published an article and it's in the Tribune or wherever, that you can trust that because you know how journalism works now, because you've had these healthy conversations and these healthy interactions with people who are trying to teach you about journalism or teach you about the way that the news works. Because why would you believe the news unless you knew how it was created, right? Like, there's so many things about news that's like opaque that people, would never be able to understand unless it was specifically explained to them. So I'm sorry, that was like such a long-winded answer. But yeah, I think it all goes back to trust. It all goes back to making sure that these interactions are happening so that people can understand why the news is what it is, and so that they feel like they have some sort of way to react to it and to influence it. Because when people feel powerless, it's really easy for them to be like, oh, no, don't listen to that. Like, I completely distrust this, and I'm going to just, discount all of that information.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Well, I do have a question. Based on your experience, well, you trained at Northwestern, which is one of the line of journalism, right? Can you tell us why communities of color and other communities are depicted a certain way?
Depicted a certain way?
Right, underrepresented. Well, like the South Side of Chicago, again, everybody think if you watch the news, there's a shooting. There are quite a few shootings on the south and west sides of Chicago, but the news never tell you that these are economically depressed areas. So you think, even when you do tourism, and I'm probably digressing and going somewhere else, but even if you look at tourism maps, the city ends at 22nd Street on those tourist maps.
If you're lucky.
No, yeah, wait a minute. That's a money spot for them. That's where McCormick Place is. So it's anything beyond 22nd is questionable, but 22nd, I studied it a while. But how did they choose which communities to show in a negative light? Why did they do it? Did you find it out in your studies?
Yeah. I won't pretend that I really learned about that in my studies. Maybe I should ask for my money back. I will say, it's a whole lot of reasons, right? And like, if I had the full answer, maybe like there'd be more movement on it at this point. But I think a lot of people are still trying to figure it out. I think the most, the one that comes to mind the quickest is just that people like hear, why is I like to hear a simple answer like, oh, it's because of the gangs, right? Like they want to hear something that is like super digestible for them, because most people don't want to think, overly long about such a complicated problem like violence and entrenched racism and institutional segregation, things like that. So when the news comes on and they say like, oh, there was a terrible, 3 kids were shot on a basketball court on the South Side, it is a terrible, terrible tragedy. And when it's your job to make sure that like after you go off air that the TV station can sell an ad, you can't go into like a 30-minute rant about institutional racism and how that happened and why, that there are young people who are shooting other young people in a neighborhood that a lot of your audience has never been to. So it's just, I think a lot of it is, many people get their news from TV, first of all, and TV is a really competitive industry where these people are, these organizations, these companies are competing against, entertainment, like actual entertainment, like watching TV and movies, and they're trying to feed you, they're trying to spoon feed you this news to make you feel like you know what's going on in your city. But at the same time, they don't really have time for it because they need to make room for like friends to go on afterwards, right? So I think a lot of the sensationalism stems from television, first of all, and the need to profit and to compete against entertainment on TV. And second of all, the simplification. So even if you're the Tribune or whatever and you get like, 1,000 words to explain it, like what are you going to do, right? Write like a PhD thesis on the Great Migration and like what happened with, housing segregation and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, I think a lot of it stems from inadequacies in our education system, and that there are a lot of people in this world who just aren't ready to hear words like institutionalized racism, right? Like there are people who think that MLK said, "I have a dream," and suddenly racism was eradicated forever. And so that's something that, like, if you're asking the nightly news to correct that assumption, it's just not going to happen. So we're really only scratching the surface here, and I could probably talk about this forever, and you'd be like, okay, please stop. But I think that, there's those reasons, and I think that those are really important reasons. And I also think, it goes back to the lack of diversity in the newsroom. I think that you can't discount how important it is that, nobody in front of the camera or behind the camera or wherever, has gone to a public school on the South Side or the West Side, and nobody there knows what it's like to grow up in a neighborhood where people are shooting, and there's not a lot of choices for people. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I know. But I feel like what we're trying to do at City Bureau is to make sure that people who have had those experiences, the ones who are interested in media, can to get the skills and hang on to the resources to be able to eventually where they are for news organizations in the city where they grew up, where they are providing the context so that, it's hard for a reporter like me out of the suburbs to be assigned to a murder her first day on the job and be like, what am I writing about? Right. So like in the future, that there are mentors and decision makers at those newsrooms who will make sure that that process happens in a more sensitive and contextualized way.
That was a beautiful answer. I was listening so intently. And I mean, thank you for weighing in on that topic. And I wanted to ask you, I only have a couple more questions. I wanted to ask you about you guys' newsroom on Thursday night. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, we have one of our programs, besides the fellowship program that Marcy was a part of, is the public newsroom, which means every Thursday night we open up our space in Woodlawn, and we ask folks to come in. We usually have like a guest speaker or a few guest speakers who, have a theme, and they facilitate a conversation or a workshop based on, whatever they might be presenting. So this week on Thursday, we have the Better Government Association, which is a nonprofit in Chicago, and they're going to host a training where people will learn skills like how to hold the government accountable. So I believe it might be a Freedom of Information Act request training or some other sort of investigative skill. And these are skills that anyone can use. You don't have to be a journalist to use them, right? Like you might be wondering, who on my block is getting permits to do construction, and you can find out that information from the city, and that could help you in your, if you're like, oh, why is my permit not coming through? You can maybe find out something by seeking out that information. So it's a really useful training for people who are looking to, understand the way that the city works better, to be able to hold public officials accountable. And that's just on Thursday. And I'm sorry, I should probably state our newsroom is at 6100 South Blackstone, and the newsroom every Thursday is from 6 to 8 p.m. So you can check out our Facebook if you want to see what theme it is every week. Always open, and often we have snacks, so come on by, and we usually have a really great time chatting about important issues that everyone cares about.
Okay. I haven't made it to newsroom mostly because that's my skate night. But one day, I'll not skate and come on through.
I need to interrupt your skate night. Maybe we'll move it from Thursday one week for you.
No, I need to just take the time not to go. I'll be through soon. And how many people have gone through your journalism program as a fellow?
So we've had about 80 to 85 fellows, I want to say. And it depends on if you include people who've gone through, because we have reporters who are sort of like emerging journalists, and then team leaders who are more seasoned journalists. So some people go through both levels too of the program.
Oh, that's wonderful. And can you just tell us some of, like, a couple of your greatest accomplishments at City Bureau?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're really proud of a lot of different, every story that goes out, like, it doesn't matter how big or how small, we're just proud because we think that the work that went into it, the process is what matters, right? Like, we try to make sure community members who are affected by each issue are involved every step of the process. So, I mean, we've been really lucky to win several awards. We got Best Startup the year that we started. We won a Sidney Hillman Award for investigative reporting on a story that we did about the Chicago Police Union and how how the police union basically shapes the narrative of police shootings in a way that is that Chicago reporters did not combat for many, many years. And this was on the heels of the Laquan McDonald revelation. So a lot of people were wondering, like, how do we get such a mistaken view of the shooting? And so we sort of pried that apart and figured it out. We've also done reporting about, how police are held accountable in Chicago public schools, which is a topic that, not a lot of people were talking about. There was a lot of passing blame back and forth. We went to CPS and they're like, oh, you should ask the police department. And then we went to the police department and they're like, oh, you should ask CPS. Which, is obviously not a good way to be handling the people who carry guns around our kids. And yeah, we recently published a collaboration with WBEZ about demolitions and how that the dust from demolition of buildings can have health consequences. Yeah, and that was actually really great. We just got word, like today, literally today, we got word that the city council is going to hold a hearing to figure out what's going on because of this investigation that we did. So that's pretty exciting too. And, I think a lot of journalists like to look at, the stories and the awards that they win for their stories, but we're really proud of things like, holding almost 50 public newsrooms now and welcoming hundreds of people to our events. We also have a program called Documenters where anybody, whether you're interested in journalism or not, you can get a training and you can be paid to attend public meetings because we're trying to collect a lot of data from public meetings like your local school council, like any sort of meeting, that kind of stuff. We actually have 300 people signed up for that in almost all of the 77 Chicago community areas. So we're really proud of that too.
Okay, so you kind of went out when you were telling us about your program. So if you could repeat the last, you were talking about the documenters, prior to the documenters.
Prior to that?
Yes.
I think we were just saying that we're proud of like hosting a lot of events where people have come and been able to hear more about our programs. And I think that's how word is spread. It's spread in person. I mean, we love social media and we think that it's a really useful tool, but you don't get people to trust you through social media. They want to shake your hand and hang out and, come and see your space and stuff like that. So we're really proud of that.
I was actually referred to City Bureau by a young lady who writes for Southside Weekly. And that's how I found out about the program. So the word of mouth is spreading. I mean, the program is spreading through word of mouth, which is a blessing.
Yeah, definitely. And we owe you a lot too, Marcy. We know that, you have a great audience who's really interested in what you say. So we really appreciate you helping us spread the word.
And I plan to do more, but yeah, I'll share more about that offline. Okay, so I'm about to wrap up. Did you have anything else that you want to tell us about City Bureau?
I guess I would just say, if you're interested, come by. We host a lot of can up. So website citybureau.org and sign up to be a documenter. It's free. In fact, you get paid to do it, or come to our public newsroom, also free. So we're always looking to get more people involved, and especially if you run an organization or you have like a group of people, we love partnering with organizations. We think like partnership is the most important thing that we do in terms of trying to be like a good citizen of the city. So we love working with groups. Let us know. We're always open.
Okay, tell us where Newsroom is again, as well as the website again, and where else we can find you online.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you can see us at www.citybureau.org. You can also come to our newsroom at 6100 South Blackstone Avenue, and that is every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. And then you can also find us on Twitter, which is at city_bureau, or on Facebook, just type in City Bureau and we should pop up. We got a little red and yellow icon.
Okay, well, thank you for that great information, Bettina. And one last thing, you're accepting applications for which program that's due February 4th?
Yes, we're accepting applications for our fellowship program, and that's for people who are interested in becoming journalists. So take a look at the website and click on fellowship, and it is due February 4th, just like Marcy said.
Thank you for the information on City Bureau.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you asked me on. This is really fun.
And I will chat with you later.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks.